Courtney Cayley.
I'm Jonathan Bitcher.
I'm Maggie Epling. Our topic is the death penalty, and we are now open for questions.
We start off with the general question of, are we for, are we against, do we have a split panel, where are we falling on the death penalty individually?
We all did end up on the side of being against the death penalty, but for different reasons. So my personal reasons are just that I don't think it's necessary in a civilized country to have it. Not specifically that I would say that some people don't deserve it, but just that in general we don't need to have it, so we shouldn't.
Okay, John.
Morally, I'm fine with it, but I feel like the economic cons, like how much it costs, and the possibility of killing someone innocent outweighs the good.
I don't think the economic side of it is going to be efficient enough. I also don't think that it is right to kill innocent people, and I don't think there's enough sufficient evidence to claim that someone is fully guilty of a crime.
So one more kind of overarching question. What is the death penalty? I know that sounds silly, but let's define it before we get started. And also, how is it typically carried out?
Okay, so Merriam-Webster defines the capital punishment as the practice of killing people as a punishment for serious crimes. The definition that we came up with was the practice of killing people who have been convicted of serious crimes that they may or may not have committed. And it is usually gone through an appeal process before it is fully gone through with, and that appeal process can take a very long time, and it can cost a lot of money. And then once that is done, there's 5 or 6 ways of killing someone. One of them including lethal injection, that is primary in all 33 states that it is legalized.
So lethal injection, do we have other ways that we execute now?
Yes, so there is lethal gas, the electrocution aspect of it. Hold on. There is electrocution is used in 9 states. Lethal gas is used in 6 states. Hanging is used in 3 states, and the firing squad is used in 3 states as well.
Wow, that's old school.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Yeah, it's less that it's used and more that it's on the books, because lethal injection is the primary method. That's what they go to. But if it's possible that if the prisoner requests something else, they will administer a different method, or if there's some sort of other barrier, they'll go to the electric chair normally.
So if somebody's convicted and sentenced to death, they have the option of which way they die?
It depends. So in Arizona, actually in 2018, they're having some problems with a new drug that they're using to put people to death. There's actually
Lethal injection drugs.
yes, lethal injection drugs. So there are 3 steps to the lethal injection. The first one is the anesthetic, which puts the inmate to sleep. The second one is the paralytic, which has no medical reason, but it stops the limbs from moving. And the third one is the one that actually initiates the cardiac arrest. So in 2011, the drug that they were previously using for the anesthetic steps, which is called sodium thiopental, was no longer sold in the U.S. And so now they tried to find they actually did some illegal trying to find the drug, but they ended up moving to midazolam in around like 2013, which is actually a sedative and not a general anesthetic. So although it does relax you, it doesn't stop pain. And so they had, it was in the news a lot, and I think 2016 there was a execution that was botched and took 43 minutes in Arizona, and there was, it was really gruesome and brutal. And so when they were putting 2 inmates to death in 2018, the inmates said they would rather be executed by the electric chair than go through what the other men went through, so they executed them with electric chair last year.
So back to my question about great description. I do remember that story was a little gruesome. Ultimately successful though, they did execute that.
He died.
But so people are given the option only if there's a botched injection, or people are generally given an option on how they like to die?
No, they're not generally given the option. It's case by case. They said that this is what they wanted. Their attorneys sort of lobbied for it, and the state agreed.
Okay, does anybody else know about your options for having your death penalty carried out? Is it just, I'm in this state, this is how they kill people?
Yes.
Yeah, that was just based on the state.
Yeah, well, lethal injection is the primary method in all states, and that's what they're going to use unless there's a special.
I thought in some states you could still opt for the firing squad.
It's on the books, but they're not, they haven't used it in decades.
So it could be used, they're just not using it.
Correct.
Okay, not a lot of people
So
saying, hey.
hanging isn't really happening.
No, they're not actively,
Okay.
they're not actively using the fire squad or hanging, it's just,
Okay.
it's technically still
An
legal,
option.
an option.
Okay.
How does this connect to the Eighth Amendment? Death penalty.
So the Eighth Amendment outlaws cruel and unusual punishment, but the Supreme Court, they've ruled that the Eighth Amendment does make the death penalty unconstitutional, but more recently they've ruled that it is constitutional.
Do you guys think it is cruel and unusual to use the death penalty?
I think it is because if you think about it, it's very barbaric to kill someone, even though they have committed a crime where they have to kill someone to get the death penalty. I feel like something worse than the death penalty is making them suffer in prison for the rest of their life. Because if you put them in solitary confinement, which is an option, instead of the death penalty, it can almost be worse because they will go insane.
Isn't that cruel and unusual?
Yes, but I believe that it is better than putting them to death.
Corey, let me kind of push back on you one thing. I believe you said that you were against the death penalty, and one of the reasons you listed a couple, but one was economic, right? It costs a lot to execute somebody. Doesn't it cost far more to incarcerate them? Say they're a 21-year-old, to incarcerate them for the rest of their natural life. Meals, rec, laundry, whatever else that comes with putting them in prison and keeping them there until they die.
So it has been shown that the death penalty, just because of the appeal process, it does cost 3 times more than putting them in prison for the rest of their life.
3 times more to whom?
Well, the stats that we saw, it said Oklahoma capital cases cost on average 3.2 times more than non-capital cases. Defense costs for death penalty trials in Kansas average about $400,000 per case compared to $1,100 per case when the death penalty was not stopped.
Yeah, it says in Texas, a death penalty case costs an average of $2.3 million, which is about 3 times, like Courtney said, the cost of imprisoning someone in a single cell at the highest security level for 40 years.
Is it legal in Kentucky?
Yes.
How does the population feel about it generally? Like Americans, are they for or against it overall?
In general, it's about 50-50, but when asked if they believe that executions lower murder rates, 88% said no.
How often does the death penalty actually get carried out? Just because you're sentenced with that, does that mean that it actually will happen?
Yes, so there have been 1,509 executions in the United States since 1976. There have been 18 this year. It is going down each year, though, sort of as people become less and less open to it.
Jonathan, we talked about the different ways that you can execute people in certain states. Are there states that are more prone to use the death penalty versus other states? Certainly there's some that have outlawed it. I believe Illinois is one that has outlawed it very recently. But am I more likely to get executed in a certain state versus another state if I do the same crime?
Yeah, so I would say that
where do I not want to commit a really, really bad crime? I'm for a friend of mine.
so committing, I would say California.
Yeah, California, although it has the largest death row population.
Usually they get appealed.
Okay.
States like Texas have a much higher execution rate.
Okay, so Texas is probably a bad place.
Texas is a bad place.
Now, does California have a higher rate because they have a higher population
Yes,
base?
that's
So is that unfair? Because you go, well, Rhode Island not so much, but California's huge, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then Wyoming has 1 death row prisoner currently, as of April 1st, 2019.
Okay.
But Wyoming has like 14 people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, percentage-wise, it's still pretty high.
Good. Please. No, don't. I'm scared of me.
Are there allowed to be witnesses to execution? I didn't know.
Yeah, I think it's just the immediate family of the
I think I saw that the attorney is normally a witness, just to have a witness that it was carried out, but I don't think modern executions have like an audience.
What about family members of the person being executed?
I don't.
We did not research that.
Do we know anything else about the process of carrying out of an execution, whether it's lethal injection, electrocution, whatever? What does that process look like? In so many movies, you'll see something and there's somebody standing by a phone waiting for a governor to call and reprieve somebody. I mean, what does that process look like day of execution? Do we know anything about that?
One thing that it has shown to be a problem is that lethal injections are not performed by medical personnel.
Okay.
The staff that do perform the execution are often not even trained to insert an IV, let alone carry out an execution.
So are these correction officers, not medical staff? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why the lethal injection actually has a 7% botch rate, which is the highest of all the execution methods. There's been cases of them not being able to insert the injection, trying in like their feet and other parts of their body to try to get it in.
For lethal injection.
For lethal injection. That's one of the reasons that it's not very efficient.
It sounds like a lot of the complications that you guys have listed, at least as far as this is cruel and unusual because these things fail a lot, seems to be lethal injection centered.
Yes.
Do we know anything about the other methods? I always remember growing up hearing that there was an electric chair in Kentucky, that's certainly an option here. You mentioned firing squad and hanging and all sorts of other things. Do we know anything?
The firing squad, it has a very big psychological effect on the executioner, of course.
Okay.
So what will usually happen is there's usually 5 volunteers that will offer themselves to stand in the line and shoot the prisoner.
Okay.
And they'll also have 2 other remaining volunteers outside of the room where they kill the person.
Okay.
And just in case one of the people that is killing the person decides that they can't do it and they back out last minute. PTSD is a huge issue whenever for the firing squad people because they're watching these people get killed, and it can have a very negative effect on how they look at death.
Another thing with the electric chair is that inmates often catch fire during the execution, which counts as being botched. And also hangings, people are strangled instead of having their necks broken. So there are the only methods that there really aren't issues with it being botched would be firing squad has 0% botch rate, and but the rest actually. So hanging has a 3.12% botch rate, electrocution almost 2%, lethal gas 5%, and lethal injection 7%.
So each of you mentioned your reasons for being against the death penalty, and there was some that kind of leaned more toward it's just not right, it's not moral. What are we using for our compass of morality here? Are we using our biblical reasons or just morality in terms of what the world says is good and what is bad?
We did reference the Bible. I think Courtney actually talked to Mr. Siemens.
I did. So whenever I talked to Mr. Siemens about it, he said that he was against it, and I asked him because the Old Testament is primarily for the death penalty, just because it is it's held at a different standard, like with the Old Covenant. And he said that Genesis 9:6 says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made his man in his own image." And he said that a good refute for that was that, yes, that's used in a biblical, ancient context, and he does not think that it's right to put that into a modern-day government system, and I feel the same way. Also, the New Testament, John 8:3-11 talks about how they found a woman caught in adultery, and they asked Jesus if they should stone her, because that's what the Old Covenant had told them to do. So it says Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." So I don't believe that it is our job as humans that are flawed to kill someone for something that I believe that God should judge.
So Old Testament law being part of the Old Covenant, no longer relevant, go by the New Covenant of Jesus, is that correct?
Yes.
So Ten Commandments out the window? Isn't that OT?
So I believe that there's some things that we should just hold to as humans themselves, and I believe that the Ten Commandments are one of them.
Okay.
But there are some things in the Old Covenant, like sacrifices, that I don't believe are correct.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, the Ten Commandments say don't kill people.
Right.
Don't kill them.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, one other thing, just like my personal beliefs, when you have in this sort of modern society when the options are either locking someone up for life or killing them, you're not. It's not any more dangerous to the public to keep them locked up, and so you're killing them because you think they deserve it. And I think that with the story that Courtney was saying about the woman, I think Jesus is telling us that it's not a judgment call that we can make what someone deserves. And so once the threat to society is neutralized, I don't think that it's necessary to carry out that final step of execution.
Let me ask you, so I read an article recently about overcrowding in Kentucky prisons and jails, right? That all of our prisons are full, and so now we house prisoners that have committed larger crimes in county jails. And now those are overcrowded, and a large percentage of the state's budget goes towards housing prisoners, where just 50 years ago, we had 25 times less prisoners. Does it not seem, and we can take out the Bible reasons for a minute, right, the religious reasons, but does it not seem more efficient to execute more people from a cost perspective? If we could find a cheaper way to do it, right, like maybe Hunger Games style, you put them all in and let them go at it. But if you could find a cheaper way to do it, wouldn't it solve, I mean, our taxes would go down? Like, it seems like it would solve a lot of issues where these folks, because we have so many with life sentences, they're repeat offenders, they're gonna sit in prison the rest of their lives. Doesn't it make sense from a society perspective to just put an end to it? I mean, otherwise they're gonna sit in jail, and I mean, Courtney, you already talked about that. That's not good for people, to just sit there, whether it's solitary confinement or with 10 other guys in a cell for the rest of their life. I mean, it just seems to me like there may be economic reasons to go back to doing it old school. You know, hangings are cheap. Yeah, they're cruel, but hey, they're cheap.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that's a little far for like hanging someone for like a drug offense. Like, yeah, just a little like bag of weed or something. Who knows? But yeah, I would say that's a little far for killing someone for that. Maybe for a bigger crime, like armed robbery or something, maybe.
Right.
But
then, and if I can follow up on that, why wouldn't it, I guess we have a problem with the death penalty, right? I mean, you guys have said you have a problem with the death penalty. I'll admit, I have a problem with the death penalty. But we don't seem to have a problem with locking people up for life, right? A guy who possesses a small bag of weed, if he does that 3 times, he can be a repeat offender and could be in prison for life for minor drug offenses as long as there's 3 over a certain period of time. Like, isn't that crazy? Or is it not?
I think our whole prison system is flawed, and the reason, I mean, we have a significantly higher percentage of people in prison than every other developed country. There's obviously something very wrong. And I think that the option of just killing people because we have too many in prison is sort of the cop-out answer. Like, I feel like there's something deeper that we need to look into that is sort of outside the realm of what we're talking about. But, yeah, but, you know, for having so many non-violent offenders in jail, I don't think that's, and you have the issue with like private prisons and people, you know, helping these judges get elected who are going to put more people in their private prisons. That's not okay. So I think it goes deeper, but the death penalty is not the answer.
Let's talk a little bit about prison. So if we're saying we shouldn't execute anybody, regardless of what your crime is, you were really just dictating, that just dictates the length of your prison sentence, correct? Has any of you guys, any of you guys ever visited a prison? Have you been exposed to that at all? Seen some documentaries on it maybe, a couple times? Okay. Let's say that this offender is not going to get the death penalty, but they are a child molester, they are a rapist, they are a mass murderer. What typically do you think that their life looks like in prison? Are they safe in prison? Is this a good place for them to be? Are they well treated in prison? I'm really lobbing you softballs here, so.
This is wonderful.
Pretty much, I believe that what will happen to them in prison is very, like, it's torture because of the crimes that they have committed. It can be much worse than the death penalty.
It's torture because they're in prison and they can't go play tennis?
Because people will treat them horribly there, and the guards will treat them